This is the Korean Peninsula at night. There's the north in darkness, and when you think of the place on Earth that's closest to hell, it's probably what comes to mind. But what if that were literally half the story, and hell extended past the landmines and machine gun nests on the border? Sounds stupid? Think again. About 80% of young South Koreans agree with my statement and want to get out of their country. And if you want to know why, don't read about the martial law declaration this December. Read this really underrated story on Webtoon, The Fox Club by H.J. Wong.
I talked about the Fox Club back in June, but now I want to talk about it a whole lot more because it got even better when it came back from its hiatus. And if you don't learn from a story as good as this one is, you're really doing yourself dirty. It also doesn't get as much promotion as it deserves on Webtoon, but I actually hope it stays that way, and we're going to talk about why before the end of the video. But it really does deserve more love, so I want to give it some love here on YouTube where it's safe. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about the three things that make the Fox Club so amazing, which is a great villain, a great hero, and a great supporting cast. We're going to talk about how they all make you learn more about the society that produced them as well. We will also briefly mention the one thing this series doesn't do so well and how you can avoid it in your own writing. Be warned, there's going to be spoilers in here. And now, let's get started.
The Fox Club is basically the 48 Laws of Power in high school, and some of the girls can be as vicious as Cleopatra. That makes you wonder, why do they have to be like that? After all, it's just high school, it's not like they have empires on the line. Well, here's why. The tone always comes from the top. Ilmi Kim is the leader of the group that gives this series its name. She's also one of the best written characters on Webtoon, period. If you see Ilmi and you think, perfect, well, too bad, because you're just like everyone else and you lack original thought. She's rich, she's the most beautiful girl in the school, she gets the highest grades, and she's training to be a K-pop idol. Except there's one little problem. All of this rests on a foundation of sand. One by one, the Fox Club's narrative shreds most of these things. Because it turns out that Ilmi isn't all that good as a K-pop trainee. She's been passed over for a pro debut more than once because her singing and dancing aren't good enough. But no one at Ilmi's school knows this. Out of sight, out of mind. Which means Ilmi can keep her aura and comfortably live in denial. But reality will always win in the end. All bubbles pop. For Ilmi, reality comes in the form of the new girl in the neighborhood, Shaeri Shin. Shaeri immediately draws eyeballs because she's so beautiful, and no one notices her more than Hwissyoung Han, Ilmi's best friend. So when Hwissyoung asks Ilmi and the rest of the girls in the Fox Club to let her in, they agree. But it's a decision that Ilmi will soon regret because Shaeri is, let's just say, a much, much bigger star than she is. And here's the proof. Shaeri secretly puts out a poll asking an all-boys school to decide whether she or Ilmi was prettier, and Shaeri wins. Hwissyoung used to like Ilmi, but she gave him up because in the bizarro world of K-pop, idols aren't allowed to date since too many fans have fantasies of dating their favorite idols themselves. Okay, you think, well, that's pretty common, but in South Korea, it's taken to an extreme. If idols get caught dating, they get shit on and called bad people because they're expected to please their most obsessive fans first and foremost. And to make this worse, the agencies encourage this weird entitlement and often put clauses in their talents' contracts that prevent them from having a partner because that's a really good idea for a country scrambling to deal with the world's worst fertility crisis, right? Well, anyway, because Ilmi made that choice, she has to watch Hwiseong move on from her and see him with Sherry. Fine, you think. Ilmi prioritizes her career over relationships. A lot of people do. But to Ilmi's horror, she soon gets to watch Sherry be a much better potential K-pop idol than her too. She's at least as pretty and she sings and dances much better. Sherry is so good that Ilmi's agent scouts her, and with little training she wants Sherry to debut in the same group Ilmi is finally set to make her debut with. So now Ilmi gets to watch Sherry rival her beauty, take her admirers' affections, and debut as an idol at the drop of a hat, while she had to work for years and years for this one and likely final chance.
Yeah, you'd probably be jealous too. And jealousy is a good motivation for a villain to do bad things. But oh no, jealousy isn't the only thing that makes Ilmi do what she does here. It's not so simple as that. If it were, the Fox Club wouldn't be on my coming list of top 100 stories, and Ilmi wouldn't be on my coming list of top 100 villains. Subscribe to see those in 2025.
Ilmi is really, really vicious for someone just acting out of jealousy. She hates Sherry so much that she secretly blackmailed her supposed friend into digging up humiliating dirt on her. When you read stuff like this, you realize that Ilmi isn't just jealous that the newcomer is stealing her spotlight. Ilmi is responding like someone who's terrified about her own survival. And that's because in her twisted mind, she is. It's not an act. And to find out why, you need to go back in time. Ilmi was born into a rich family, but she was only the second daughter of a family that wanted a son to inherit the estate.
I don't know if this is a Korean thing in general or if it's more of an Ilmi family problem. Tell me which one it is.
Anyway, Ilmi's family tried for a son, got her instead, and her mom couldn't have any more children because the birth was so hard. So the result was that Ilmi's mom truly loved the older sister Sanmi because after all, she had already given her her love, and that was when she could still have the son she wanted. But Ilmi, she was an unwanted daughter, and worse, she was the cause of not being able to have that son. So Ilmi grew up watching her sister be constantly favored. It was to the point that when she was asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, Ilmi said she wanted to be her sister so that their mom would love her as much as Sanmi. So yeah, the relationship between Ilmi and her mom is pretty fucked up. But it gets worse. The sisters looked like they were close at first, but then their mom took Sanmi's piano away even though she was good at it and dreamed of going pro. Why? Because according to mom, oh, it's just something you do for brain development. It's not something you do as a profession or anything. And then Ilmi made the mistake of blurting her sister's dream to their mom, and mom responded by forcing Sanmi on the conventional Korean path. Go to a prestigious university and then get some corporate job somewhere. Go live someone else's dream, not your own. Sanmi never forgave Ilmi for this. From then on, she became abusive toward her sister, who now lost the one person in the immediate family she could depend on. Then Ilmi's mom admitted to her grandma that she wished she could have aborted her younger daughter before she realized her sex. And Ilmi heard the whole thing in secret. If you're wondering why the hell she didn't go to live with her grandmother right there and then, I don't blame you, but the lesson Ilmi took from that experience was that she had to be as good as her sister in everything and be perfect on the outside no matter how fucked up she was on the inside. So how could being a celebrity not be my calling? And hey, it helped that being a celebrity meant she got out of that house and didn't need to see her family, right? Everything Ilmi does comes from this survival instinct. Yeah, it sucks to see someone get something so easily that you worked so hard for. Yeah, it's really painful that Ilmi wound up losing Hwiseong, who was one of the two people in her daily existence that actually gave a shit about her. But all of that is secondary. Ilmi feels that anything less than perfection, or at least the appearance of it, means that her survival is threatened. And she isn't entirely wrong. That was why Ilmi formed the Fox Club in the first place. It wasn't so much a friendship group as a way for the prettiest girls to band together for their own survival. It's a bit like the old story of the Sword of Damocles. Once you've taken power unjustly, you have to use it, or it will be used against you. The girls have to listen to Ilmi's words as the law and the truth. They're not even allowed to have siblings, or they can't get into the club. And it works. The Fox Club stays at the top of the social hierarchy, and Ilmi stays as the queen. Then Shayri comes in and disrupts everything. For Ilmi, it was a declaration of war on her reason to exist.
And here's the best example. Remember when I said that there were two people that actually gave a shit about Ilmi? Well, Hwiseong was one of them. The other, it was her supervisor at the agency, Miss Seo.
I hope I have a daughter like you one day. If I wasn't loved because I was the second, then I'll just become someone else's first. So when Ilmi has to watch Shayri get Miss Seo's praise and even put front and center in the girl group, she begins to think her survival is threatened. Therefore, her hatred of Shayri knows no bounds. In Ilmi's mind, Shayri must be destroyed.
H.J. Wong really deserves a lot of credit because not everyone can write a villain like this. Usually they'll either be irredeemably evil like Palpatine or Sauron or Adam Smasher, or they'll have a tragic backstory that saw them make awful choices, so you're sympathetic for them and you hope that they can be redeemed even if they need to be stopped before they reach their goal, such as Anakin Skywalker slash Darth Vader, Tribal Chief Roman Reigns, or Valgarv from Slayers. Ilmi somehow falls between these two categories. She has a gut wrenching background, and yet she becomes an irredeemable evil.
It worked really well because I have no sympathy for Ilmi. Her background makes her more complete and believable as a character, but it doesn't make me not want to see her get beaten like she deserves. A good villain is the most important driver of a story most of the time, and the Fox Club's villain? A plus. Ilmi's gonna be pretty high on the list next year. But what's a good villain without a good hero? Well, we have one there too. Shayri Shin shows up out of the blue and makes a big impression really fast, as you already know. Aside from her looks, she's so cool and confident and will fight like hell for her friends, but her past stays a mystery. Even her supposed best friend Anyu doesn't know anything about her family or about her life before she moved into the neighborhood. But we know that it isn't good because she's not who she says she is. Her face isn't natural, it's the product of plastic surgery. She admitted this to Hwseong. Since that's common in South Korea, no one bats an eye about it. But there's more. A lot more. She doesn't get good grades, which means she's doomed in South Korea unless she makes it in the entertainment industry. She also has an eating disorder. She'll purge herself to stay thin. Anyu doesn't know anything about this either, but Ilmi does. And Shayri Shin isn't even her real name. There's even this guy who knew her from that time saying she's a bully. So it looks like Shayri must be really bad. Bad enough that if whatever is wrong with her got out, it could ruin her chance to make it as an idol. But it turns out her real name is Hwee Baek, and tell me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. The scandal? She ran away from home because she had family problems and was bullied in middle school. The bullies shoved her downstairs, stole and burned her bag, and spread rumors about her. And now the facts finally come out thanks to Ilmi's malice. She wants Shairi ruined and out of the girl group she's about to debut with. You would think that Ilmi wouldn't have much leverage because why would revealing any of this hurt Shairi's chances for that? Well, for some reason, South Korea is fucked up enough for Ilmi to think that it would. So Shairi drops out of high school, and even though it's good her agency is standing by her for now, it also means that they pretty much own her because high school dropouts have few prospects here in the good old USA. In a South Korea obsessed with academics, it's a lot worse. And because these agencies can practically slave drive their talent, Shairi's phone is taken when she moves into the dorm. That's standard operating procedure. Don't forget this girl has an eating disorder, so I'm sure the K-pop industry is going to be great for that, right?
I don't know how these things are going to flare up in the future, but the fact that I can ask and imagine how everything is going to happen is the sign of a good narrative. Sherry is a really good main character. She has a compelling conflict, and she also acts as a vessel to examine a lot of the issues her society is dealing with. Again, not everyone can do this. Stray too far, and you risk becoming overtly political, and that ruins everything, as if we haven't seen that over and over again in this day and age. So it's to H.J. Wong's credit that she's been able to create two deeply layered characters that can keep you immersed and yet still reflect real and understandable problems. A good hero and villain should be enough for you to read The Fox Club. Shairi and Ilmi are very interesting. But this story also shines with a great supporting cast.
The other girls in the Fox Club band together to make sure they stay at the top of the social food chain, and each one adds something to this dangerous coalition of convenience. Sora is the most interesting of the four. Initially, she's the most welcoming member to Shairi and Anyu, so you get behind her quickly. But she goes out with a college guy at the start of the series, and you can guess what happens from there. The other girls tell her this is no good, and she doesn't listen, but it's not just teenage stubbornness. Sora comes from a family that crosses the line between being strict and being abusive. They want her to go down the traditional Korean academic path and won't tolerate any deviation from that. When they find out about her boyfriend, they hit her and forcibly cut her hair. So naturally, Sora is cautious and lives in fear. And when she becomes a blackmail victim over some bad pictures with her ex, she'll do anything to avoid them being published, including digging up dirt on Shairi since Sora never really got to like her anyway. So Sora hovers between being a babyface and being a heel through the story. Whenever there's chapters featuring her, you know they're going to be interesting. Then there's Hyuna, who looked like she would be trouble at the start of the series, but she's actually the moral compass of the group when she gets the chance to be. She was bullied for being fat, so she knows at least a little of the pain Shairi feels and doesn't want to do bad things. Naturally, she didn't want that bad stuff to happen to her again, so she joined the group mostly to survive once she lost weight and got pretty. She has the capacity to lead, and her approach to power is the opposite of Ilmi's, so she's not the type who would need to worry about a sword of Damocles over her head. So when you see all of this and you see Hyona's evolution, you hope that she can eventually become the leader of the group and steer things in a better direction. There's Hyojong, who you could say is the least interesting of the group if you're too cynical, but she's actually the most normal one. She's kind of the straight girl in this group. She ratted Sora out mostly because she hoped to keep her image clean rather than for Sora's sake, but she learned a tough lesson from it, and as time goes on, you see that she's really a good kid at heart that just needs to grow up a little and have proper guidance, like all teenagers do. Then there's Yanju, and for a while, I thought she was the most dangerous. She's good at getting information and using it to her advantage by lying and manipulating. I thought she was even playing Ilmi like a puppet for a while because her goal was to break Hwseong and Shaeri up so that she could have him, and she seemed to be using Ilmi as a cat's paw for that. Well, I was wrong. Anyway, Yeonju's goal isn't some grand scheme, but something that's normal for a girl her age. She's not sympathetic, but she also isn't irredeemable yet. So you wonder if she can overcome her flaws. If not, she adds a lot of tension to the story when Ilmi isn't around, and her head games with Hyuna are always fun to read. So through it all, you can see that the girls could be good friends without Ilmi and Yeonju, as she currently is, influencing them, but you also see that they aren't right now. They hang out together and talk, but they're not anything close to the friends that Shaeri and Anyu are. Shaeri and Anyu's presence is something you hope can eventually get the girls to fully turn on the right path, and that seems to have worked with Hyuna and Hyojong, and you really hope it works for Sora too eventually, and maybe even Yeonju. With Hyuna taking point, it could all work out. So all of these supporting characters add a lot to the story.
But talking about Anu leads me to the one problem this series has. I brought it up in my last webtoon video because it's unfortunately all too common on the platform, and it's common in the Fox Club too. Outside of her relationship with Shaeri, Anu is not that good of a character, and even the friendship is starting to stretch into absurdity.
Anyu wasn't bad at first. We were seeing Shaeri's story mostly from Anyu's point of view, so that made her interesting. Since she got into the Fox Club riding Shaeri's coattails, she had a real source of conflict. She didn't seem to fit in because she wasn't as pretty as the other girls. She even got bullied by the so called ordinary girls who were jealous of her supposed new status. So there was a real risk of complete isolation. And she was naturally worried if Shaeri would still be her friend after being involved with the Foxes. Unfortunately, these conflicts got lost over time. Anyu's good nature began to change some of the other girls for the better, so that's good, but she lost most of the things that could have made her interesting, and she instead becomes a saintly Mary Sue. Anyu always does the right thing, and her reactions to the changes in Shaeri's life are extremely unrealistic. What would you do, for example, if you realized your best friend was keeping all these secrets from you? Obviously, you'd be a little shocked and feel a bit bad, right? Not with Anyu. All she does is worry about Shaeri because that's the quote right thing to do in the narrative. Now you add her boyfriend Minu to the mix, who I talked about in that video I mentioned earlier, and you get shallow wish fulfillment characters that don't add much. They're popular, they allow a lot of readers to insert ideal versions of themselves into the story, so that's good for the view count, but this is another case of this sort of algorithmization of art and culture that I'll talk about at another time. So at this point in the Fox Club, it feels like Anyu and Minu belong in a different story. They're now really, really inconsistent with everything else that goes on. So I'm hoping that's going to be fixed, but for now, their characterizations are holding the story back from reaching its full potential. Whenever I see a chapter focusing on Anyu, especially if Minu is there, I know I'm about to read mostly a whole bunch of nothing unless Shaeri or Ilmi or one of the other girls are involved in some way. So for now, it's fortunately staying contained, but if this thing escapes and runs wild and takes more and more chapters, the story will be ruined.
And that's why I hope the Fox Club stays underrated on Webtoon, because if it trended more, I know what's going to happen. it's gonna become like Odd Girl Out, which means it's gonna lose the things that made it special in favor of the typical tacky webtoon romance formula with Anyu and Minu, and I have no interest in that. Anyway, despite this flaw, the Fox Club is still far and away one of the best things you're going to find on Webtoon. If you're interested in a more mature story and the application of power, it's definitely something you're going to want to read, so go ahead and do that. And that's it for now. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and very Happy New Year. Thank you guys so much for the support you've given the channel in 2024. If you want to support me more or hire me, you can look in the description or look at the links at the end. Please at least subscribe, like, and comment since, well, you're here at the end of the video and it helps the channel to grow. See you guys in 2025, and we're going to start with a look at one of the best anime series you probably haven't heard of. One of my favorite shows of all time, Blue Gender. And we're going to see why it is a forgotten almost masterpiece. So until 2025, guys, until Blue Gender, keep writing and keep fighting. We will see you then.